afternoon. Welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramazan. I'm very pleased to say my guest today is His Excellency, the High Commissioner of India. Your Excellency, welcome back to the program. I almost need no introduction. You've been on so many times now, and it's always an honor to have you on. Now, you initially planned to come on today to talk about some cultural events that the High Commission is involved in early next year. But right now, we're sort of faced with a global situation that is obviously going to affect Trinidad and Tobago of some pressure on oil prices right now. They're at a very, very low point. I think it's a 4 or 5 year low at this point. And we've also got some concerns about the gas prices. You're here as a representative of the largest developing world economy, that's a democracy. You obviously have to face challenges as well. How does a country like India deal with situations where there is this sort of fluctuating, for example, energy prices?
Thank you very much once again for inviting me to this show. I'm grateful to you and to IETV for this. I think this economic problem of the world is absolutely very, very important issue, and the fluctuation of oil prices affects all industries because every industry is a consumer of oil. In this situation, countries like India are happy because they are oil consuming countries, they are importing huge amounts. But then all the oil producing countries are very unhappy and they are losing heavily. These kind of economic fluctuations and crises are likely to be more and more in the world. And as you know, I have been telling in my talks earlier that this mad race for growth of GDP constantly by all the nations and all the enterprises, they want to increase their sales and their profits, is going to be a disastrous approach in the future. Firstly, you cannot sustain growth all the time to come. We have been growing at a rate of 3-4% per annum since the World War II. The per capita income of countries like USA was approximately $4,000 during 45, has gone up to $50,000-$60,000 today. Even then, they want to grow more. So what is the limit of the growth? This limit has to be set. If we do not set this limit, we are what we call in a consumption driven society. A society which is consuming more and more and still stressing themselves more and more. Because the more you consume, the more you have to work for to acquire the new acquisitions. And for that, it causes a lot of stress on you. Every time you have to change your cell phone, you have to earn money, you have to understand the new system, it's stressful. Every time you change your computer, it's stressful. You change your car, it's stressful. Now it is becoming a habit that every 1 year you change this, every 2 years you change this. How long can we continue? It's also an environmental disaster. So I think the world has to rethink about its developmental policy as a whole.
The world it's almost a cult of consumerism that's emerged over the last decades.
You see, this consumerism has evolved particularly after Second World War, much more so. And this is what is leading to economic disasters, this is leading to ecological disasters, it's causing a lot of environmental damage, and simultaneously it is also causing stress amongst the humanity, leading to lot more stress driven diseases. You see many more heart attacks today, you see many more Alzheimer's disease, you see people born autistic. Still people do not understand that the consumption driven society is not the ideal thing to do. Poverty is a curse. We must take care of poverty to some extent, that people are not without food, without medicine and without shelter. But beyond that, it's an infinite process. The more you get, the more you want. Once I remember there used to be 3-star hotels at the maximum. Then came the 5-star. Now we have 7-star. Then they will do 9 stars. Then they will do 11 stars. Where do we stop? And for acquiring all that, you need to damage the earth. You need to damage the environment. And it is causing stress for the humanity. I think we should rethink the path we are taking on from now onwards.
In terms of how India manages its growth, is there more of a focus on equitable distribution of wealth, the fact that you're trying to build a middle class as opposed to this philosophy that emerged primarily during the Reagan-Thatcher years, this trickle-down theory that if the upper echelons earn more, it'll eventually trickle down to benefit the rest of society. Is that India's approach, or do you use a more sort of forward-thinking approach?
This trickle-down approach hasn't really worked. You see more and more billionaires in the world today. At the same time, you see more and more poverty. Approximately 1 billion people in the cities, they live in the slums today. If you go to Rio, Mumbai, Delhi, you see the conditions of living are extremely horrible. On the other hand, you have billionaires who have no limit on the wealth. So the trickle-down theory has not really worked. What actually is going to work is an education, a campaign for education, that this kind of consumption-driven approach to life is not the best approach to life. We have to inculcate more spiritual values. We have to inculcate more awareness about environment and our surroundings. We have to inculcate more awareness about our fellow human beings who live with us, who work with us. Then only this approach will work. It cannot be governed by a set of rules set by the government. No, it will be governed by the society through change in the social structure, through change in the education, through change through mutual understanding amongst people.
And we should, I guess, some countries, I think, is it Bhutan that has gross national happiness, for example, as opposed to gross national product. Is that actually a good sort of strategic move to say we're concerned about the happiness of our citizens, not necessarily if they have more money or if there's more consumerism going on?
I think that's a very good approach. In fact, Bhutan has set a new principle at the UN as well. This was also adopted as a part of UN resolution, if I remember correctly, in 2011 or 12. And therefore, the UN has accepted that the higher per capita income or more consumption is not the way to develop. The way to develop is to have more happiness. Happiness is a composite product. As I mentioned before, that extreme poverty is also very dangerous. So we should avoid that. But beyond that, then we should set certain other parameters. How we take care of the environment. If we go back 50 years in time, I remember my childhood. We used to take care of environment. All the animals will live in the same place where we used to live. The plants and trees will be grown there. We will grow our own vegetables, our own fruits. We will milk our own milk, from the cows and fellows. And we live together in harmony. Now that environment has completely disappeared. We have come to what we call civilization of cities, in which you live in the boxes which are made of, these apartments are like boxes, where there is no space for animals and for plants and other vegetables.
Or even human interaction quite often.
Yeah. Even for human interaction. So we have segregated environment completely. Today, if you go to some countries in the world, the children feel that the egg and the bread is produced in a factory. They do not realize that it is coming out of fields. The wheat is grown in the fields. They feel it is grown in a factory. In France, I remember, they used to have every year an agricultural fair for the children to educate them that this is how the bread is made, this is how the eggs are coming, this is how the milk is coming to them, because they don't know what the agricultural farms are. So we have reached a stage where there is total disconnect between the environment and the humanity. I think that cannot continue for very long. And in this context, let me put the problem of oil. The problem of oil is two-way. On the one hand, it will help the countries which are paying heavily. On the other hand, it will harm the countries which are producing and which are dependent on oil for a long time. It will destabilize both the ways, because the countries which are producing, they will be hurt more right now, but then ultimately it will hurt the entire economy of the world, because the internal economy of the world is what we call two-dimensional flow. the wealth does not stand in one place, it moves from one place to another, and ultimately that damage which is happening to the producers today will be transported or transferred to the consuming countries after a few years. So, this is a process of give and take. I think we must realize and adopt a new approach to economic development, approach based on lower consumption, approach based on taking environment into account, approach based on better education of humanity, based on spiritual values, based on the philosophy of contentment, because as Mahatma Gandhi said, you would remember that there is enough for everybody's need, but there is not enough for everybody's greed.
So true.
And this is what is happening today.
And I guess the other problem is we have this philosophy of consumerism as being the ultimate measure of happiness. We've been trained in the West that happiness is about having more material things. And unfortunately, while that is obviously unsustainable, as you said, unfortunately that expectation also extends, it starts spreading into developing countries as well, where you have populations who aren't even close to that possibility of obtaining masses of material wealth, suddenly having an expectation that they want to get that. And that sort of distorts national policy, doesn't it? Because the population starts to expect things that are unreasonable.
You see, if you apply these yardsticks in country like India and China, everybody wants to have a same standard of living as prevailing in US or Europe. You will require 4 to 5 Earths to sustain the present level of population of 7 billion. And if the population continues to grow, you would require more Earths to sustain. It is only because the population in the developing countries like India is comparatively poor that we are able to sustain the what you call environmental balance. If the Indian people, all of them reach the same level as Americans and Europeans, I think there would be no place on this earth to live, because there would be tremendous pollution, there would be no place to dispose your waste, there would be what you call carcinogenic materials in such an abundance that the earth will become infertile, the fertility of the earth will completely disappear. So, we are going to reach that stage if we continue on this path. I think it is time that when the United Nations summit takes place next year and the world leaders meet, they should think about this so called growth model and the development model in the world as a whole. The countries which are below poverty line, I think they should be sustained to overcome the poverty. The countries which are very wealthy, they should restrain the growth and bring the consumption levels at sustainable level, at lower level. I think that is the way to move forward.
Because for I guess the history of the world, we've had islands within the world, even though they're actually continents we're talking about, where people live extremely wealthy lives. But ultimately, as you mentioned, that is not transferable to the rest of the globe. It simply is not possible given the world's reserves.
Absolutely not possible. For 7 billion people, having a lifestyle of what an American does, it's impossible with the resources given in this world. If that kind of lifestyle actually takes place, as I mentioned, the earth would be unlivable, because the amount of pollution, contamination of the water, of the soil, of the oceans and of the air would be so much that nobody will be able to live happily here. And that there would be tremendous amount of new diseases in this world which are already coming. You check the World Health Organization's website, they themselves are telling the number of new diseases which are happening now never happened in the history of mankind. And these are happening precisely because of these higher consumption patterns which are leading to tremendous contamination of the environment.
And you've got North America, which fortunately for them, I guess Canada and the US, and well, we'll exclude Mexico for the time being, where they've got a relatively small population sitting on a vast amount of natural resources.
Yes.
On the other hand, you've got India with well over 1 billion people, sort of wedged into a much smaller landmass and having to try and make the best of that. I mean, one is not transferable to the other in any way. India has to make the best of what it has, I guess.
To some extent you are right, but to some extent no. Because given the globalization which has happened in the last 20 years, and which can happen in another 20 years, the resources are no more non-transferable. All resources are transferable today. If you look at the minerals which are going from Latin America to China, the oil going from Latin America to China and India, everything is transferable today. Even water is transferable.
If you've got the money to buy it.
Exactly, that is what is happening. So the transferability is gradually become less of a problem. The more of a problem is the overall contamination and the overall availability of resources. What is going to happen is a war for resources. You see, there are certain precious commodities in the world which needs to be controlled in order to keep this pace of development. First, of course, is energy. Then there are metals like iron ore, copper, gold, silver, some of these other metals which are used in the new materials which we have developed. These metals and these minerals are limited. There is already a war for control over these resources. This war will intensify further, and it will intensify to an extent there could be actually a physical war for these resources, and I do not see that far away. It is possible to see these kind of wars happening in the next 3 to 4 decades.
Because I've even heard that there may be wars over other, even more important natural resources, like, for example, water, clean drinking water.
Exactly.
In some parts of the world, that is a commodity that is in very short supply, and yet the majority of that is sitting in North America, again, in the Great Lakes.
I think the water is going to be a serious problem too. You are absolutely right. And when I was in UNESCO Paris a few years ago, this used to be talked about, that the biggest problem we can face in the 21st century, it could be because of water. This is also having, the impact of water is in variety of ways. Firstly, because of the what you call greenhouse gases, the glaciers are melting, the lakes are drying up, the rivers are drying up. If you look at the flow of these rivers and glaciers, there are many studies have been conducted. They conclusively tell you that because of the greenhouse gases, the water is receding in all these resources, and therefore the availability of fresh water will decline. That is one part. The second part is the erratic pattern of rainfall. Ultimately, the water has to rise from the ocean beds and go into the atmosphere, form into the clouds and fall back. Now that is also becoming a problem because of a lot of changes in the environment. You can see around the world, certain parts are flooded terribly, certain parts are absolutely dry, certain parts are having heavy snowfall, certain falls do not even get the normal winter. So these patterns will again affect the supply of water, because this is part of the water cycle. And the third part is the groundwater. Now groundwater is very important in countries like India. When I was a child, we used to have wells in villages which will go about 20 meters, 30 meters deep, and you will get fresh water from the ground, and most of the villages used to get water like that. Today the same well is about 200 meters deep, 10 times of what it used to be that time. We used to have what we call water storage. We used to call them talab in India. In the rainy season, monsoon season, these talabs are filled with water, and that water remains stored in the talab throughout the year, and gradually it recedes into the ground, refilling the ground level, the what you call water table. Now that water table is also receding, as I mentioned, partly because of excessive use, partly because of there is non-functioning talabs. The talabs have been completely demolished in most of the country, and therefore there is no replenishment of the groundwater table. So these are three regions where the water will become a serious problem. The receding level of water in rivers and lakes and glaciers, the erratic patterns of rainfall, and the water table of the ground going down everywhere.
And I think we're seeing the deserts growing as well around the world. The great deserts of the world are in fact expanding. And of course, the desertification, which apparently is happening as well.
Exactly, exactly.
So we have all these challenges ahead of us in both the developed and the developing world. I mean, how can we be optimistic that we as human beings can see a better way in the future?
I think we feel that we are developed, but I feel that we are not developed. I feel that we are almost going down in terms of human development.
Well, I guess if you're very material, then in fact you aren't really truly developed, are you? If you're obsessed with material things, then your level of development is sort of at a child's level of what you can have, as opposed to spiritually and emotionally developed.
I think the material availability of goods and services can never be an indication or can never be an index of development. On the contrary, if you can manage with less, that is more critical index of development. You know, in the economics, there is a very prominent theory that an enterprise which produces X amount of output with Y input, another enterprise produces the same amount of output, X output, with Y minus 1 input, the second one is considered more efficient because its input is less for the same amount of output. The same way, a human being who consumes less from the nature and lives with that is more developed, more enlightened, more productive than the person who consumes more. The person who consumes more and more and more, it means he is unhappy. Otherwise, why should he consume more? The sheer race for more and more consumption indicates that he is unhappy.
So what we're going to have then in the future, we have about 4 minutes left, I should let you know, is that we'll have a war of philosophies going on. We'll have the developed world where materialism serves their interests well, because that's how they do it, and they've got the resources to keep doing it. And we've got the developing world that realizes it has challenges that are based on population and available natural resources, saying, listen, there's a different way that we have to approach this. There's two philosophical ideas sort of clashing then in the future.
I think there has to be a balance. The middle path is the best path, as Gautam Buddha said. We cannot avoid materialism completely. The human body needs certain needs are there. So we have to fulfill those needs, and those are material needs. But at the same time, we cannot ignore a large population which is below poverty line. Now, there is approximately 3 billion people across the globe who are considered poor or below poverty line. On the other hand, you have
Which is just about half the world's population.
half the world's population, and then you have about 3 billionaires who I believe own 40% of the total resources of this world. 3 billionaires alone. So this is the disparity we have to address. We should stop talking about higher GDP, we should start talking about better distribution of the wealth which is available already. And we should start talking about contentment, that try to be content with what you have. We should try to reduce the consumption gradually. In Indian philosophical thought, it is always emphasized that the less you consume, the more enlightened you are. And I think that applies to the entire humanity even today. If you look at the human development or the historical figures in the past who have been extremely rich, who have been very powerful, whether they have been really enlightened is a question mark. The people may be very rich, but whether they are enlightened is a question mark. So enlightenment does not come with riches. It is not correlated. It may be with riches. I am not denying that rich people are not enlightened. I am not saying that either. They could be rich people, enlightened people. There could be rich people who are totally non-enlightened. So there is no correlation between the two. The correlation is only between good education and enlightenment. If the people who have been taught what you call the human values, that we have to live together, The whole world is one single family, one single society. We have to exist together. We are dependent on the nature for everything we need in this world, whether we need air to breathe, whether we need water to drink, food to eat, everything comes from nature. Therefore, nature is our mother, and we cannot destroy that mother by excessive consumption. We have to preserve that mother, we have to give respect to that mother which is feeding us every second of our existence. That is the second value of which we have to learn. The third value is that we have to coexist as a human race. So, a developed world and the developing world, the difference will slowly disappear. It's already disappearing with so much migration of people from one world to another world, and this will disappear after a few years much more. If it will not disappear, there would be what you call more violent activities against the so-called rich by the poor.
And social unrest.
That social unrest would be seen in the world in more visible, tangible form in the years to come. It is not so much visible right now, but it will happen in the years to come if this kind of disparity continues.
Well, Your Excellency, let's hope we choose the previous path then, which was of looking at our values and making the world a better place. Season's greetings, Stephen. Thank you so much for coming in, Your Excellency.
No, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and let me also use this opportunity to wish everyone very happy New Year, very Merry Christmas, and all the best for this the coming festive season.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been watching One on One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.